any of that means. And how are you going to? It sounds to me too. It's just they're just going to just like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just make stuff up. They're just going to make up some numbers and throw them out there and try to determine whatever methodology they're going to use to try to quote unquote rebate taxes to people, but they're going to have no idea what any of it means.
You know, Glenn, you know what I think might be useful for people? Just like the ends of those car commercials when they have, it's a great rebate. The deal doesn't actually apply to blah, 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 blah. You know how they do that at the end and it goes very, very quickly at the end of things? Maybe what we should do is have you read it again, and then when I go back into the mix, I'll speed it up at just the rate the government would want people to hear it. Are you ready?
Okay, hold on a second.
Okay, get ready, everybody. This is good stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Jacobs providing you the information on the maximum energy credit.
For each calendar year, the Environmental Protection Agency shall determine, pursuant to subparagraph B3, the aggregate reduction in purchasing power among all United States households that results from the regulation of greenhouse gas emissions under Title VII of the Clean Air Act, and distribute that aggregate reduction in purchasing power among all United States households based on household share of total consumption by all households, the carbon intensity and carbon emissions intensity of household consumption, and the share of households' carbon and carbon emissions consumption that is not financed by federal benefits, subject to a cost of living adjustment that offsets increased carbon costs. Maximum energy tax credit. The maximum energy tax credit shall be equal to the arithmetic mean value of the amount allocated under Clause I to household of a specified household size in the lowest income quintile. Tax filings that include 5 or more individuals shall be eligible for the mean value of the amount allocated under Clause I to households that includes 5 or more individuals.
Yeah! Woo! Very good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Glenn. And you can go on to your auction anytime now. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, do I hear 5? Do I hear 5? In the mean household, do I hear 5? Yes, I hear 5. Okay. Oh, man.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And like we said, what that really means is it's an earned income tax credit piece of nonsense where they're going to be giving money to people again.
Yeah, and it's going to allow people to buy votes because the poor and middle class will not see in their taxes. The cost of this program is going to be shifted elsewhere. And they will think that because they receive something in their taxes, credit, that it's actually not costing them anything. But instead they'll be taxed because energy and other services are going to be so much more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Passed on indirectly to them.
Now, Glenn, let's investigate something that they've been working on for a long time is to create these little federal Soviet-style programs and bureaus for health care. Beyond Medicare, beyond Medicaid, beyond the VA, beyond S-CHIP, which is managed by the states but is still partially funded by the federal government. They're now using the climate change cap and trade legislation to create a whole bunch of new grants they're going to give to universities. And beyond that, there's this weird nebulous concept that they're pushing in this on the healthcare side of it, which you discovered. Can you tell us about this?
Well, under Title IV, Part 1, which is domestic adaptation, Subpart B, public health and climate change.
Oh, of course. I love that part. It's my favorite part.
It allows the federal government to deal with the concerns of climate change on public health. It says that it is the sense of the Congress that the federal government, in cooperation with international, state, tribal, and local governments, concerned public and private organizations, and citizens, should use all practical means and measures to assist the efforts of public health and healthcare professionals, first responders, states, tribes, municipalities, and local communities to incorporate measures to prepare health systems to respond to the impacts of climate change, to ensure that the nation's health professionals have sufficient information to prepare for and respond to the adverse health impacts of climate change, the utility and value of scientific research in advancing understanding of the health impacts of climate change, and strategies to prepare for and respond to the health impact of climate change. And it just goes on and on and on. And again, what this does allows the federal government to control funding to health professionals, to local governments, to state governments, and also to, as you identified earlier, to become even more involved in education by advancing scientific research in the understanding of the health impacts of climate change, which simply means that they're going to dole out more money to universities and other politically connected organizations
Yes.
that they like.
Yes, and in fact, it's a great propaganda tool to continue funding things for alarmist research to say, if the climate increases by X percent over these many years, this will happen. If the climate goes down by this many degrees, because now, of course, they're calling it climate change, because they're not seeing global warming anymore. It's going down. So they're going to have an out either way.
Right.
And so if you have a hot summer, then you'll be hearing ABC News saying, but the Obama administration is ready for this because they're funding research into what happens to older people when it gets hot. Well, duh, of course. I mean, give me a break.
And the one thing you'll never see
is
you'll never see any of the people that are receiving government funding saying, well, this isn't really a problem, because then they would quit receiving government funding. Jobs.
Exactly.
It's a very skewed sort of pseudoscience based upon political objectives.
Oh, absolutely. If people don't realize how badly science has become totally managed by government, they really ought to take a look. Almost any university, the only way you can become a tenured professor is if you get some sort of government grant coming through to the university. It's really disgusting. And there's so many other things that they're starting to do. You pick out any other items that are in this bill, in addition to the healthcare stuff, the enhancing preparedness activities, that's particularly dangerous to me. To assist in efforts of developing nations to incorporate measures to prepare health systems to respond to the impacts of climate change. Again, just more money going out that it comes from Americans' taxpayers' pockets. Tell us a little bit about some other things that you've noticed.
Well, there's a section, too, that will increase foreign aid.
Oh, great.
Yeah. It is Title IV, Subtitle D. And at least they're honest about it. It's called Exporting Clean Technology. And according to the Washington Post, this will actually result in the United States government subsidizing foreign governments and lumber companies not to harvest trees, much like FDR paid farmers in the Great Depression not to raise crops while people were starving.
Oh, my goodness. And, of course, that is going to inspire more pressure from the lumber companies if there's ever a decrease in demand for their products to continue to get paid to have their items, to have the trees not to go out on the market. Just like the first article I think I ever had published was how the federal government was going to pay people for not growing plums because there was a glut of plums on the market. And so they were going to actually pay people to pull up the plum plants. And my mom said, well, shoot, we could make money just by planting the plants and then digging up the germinated seeds. I said, yeah, Mom, that's absolutely right. That is unbelievable, Glenn. Ugh.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, is that the reason that, for example, lumber companies, now this is not probably so much true in third world nations where, property rights aren't respected, and unfortunately the indigenous people are often taken advantage of by the governments and by the corporations that governments work with.
Yeah.
But an example in the United States, lumber companies are a prime planter of trees because they realize that over the long term they're going to have to replace their resource. And it's because trees are used and because people use paper that we have more trees now than we did at the beginning of the turn of the 20th century, because it's a resource, it's actually a renewable resource that needs to be managed. And what they're going to do is they're going to skew that market, and we will end up having less trees because of it. And if CO2 is a problem, which I don't believe it is, but if CO2 is a problem, trees are a natural scrubber, a natural CO2 scrubber. So once again, you're defeating the whole purpose of, or the ostensible purpose of the bill by increasing inflation. Increasing pollution or increasing inflation, too. That's a completely different story. It's going to have the unintended consequence of doing the exact opposite of what they intend to do.
I was wondering, Glenn, do you think that this could have been something that was thrown out to the tree harvesters because there has been a less of a demand for wood for new home construction?
I'm sure it could have. I know that farmers actually backed this bill thought it was a better deal than what they would get later, because the USDA is in charge of regulating the farmers as opposed to the EPA, and the farmers thought that the USDA would be more lenient than the EPA. Of course, because we all know that carbon dioxide produced by cattle and other livestock, as well as methane, contributes to global warming.
Jeez. Okay, now what's next on this wonderful smorgasbord of treats the federal government is possibly going to give us?
Well, I actually don't have any more specifics.
Yeah.
But I do have an interesting question.
All right.
Generally, when politicians look at problems, they only think to their next election term. Most of them are thinking in 2 or 4 year cycles.
Mm-hmm.
As John Maynard